Morning, everyone, and welcome to BRINC Funding Circular Economy Projects Online Workshop. My name is Anita, and I am a project officer at ACR Plus, as you can see from my background, the Association of Cities and Regions for Sustainable Resource Management. ACR Plus is one of the four partners of the EU-funded BRINC project, which focuses on public procurement of innovation to accelerate circular economy. And it is in the context of BRINC that we have organized today this workshop. And the aim is to give you an overview of existing funding opportunities for circular economy projects, and advice on how to access and secure this funding for your projects and ideas. So we're very happy to have a panel of experts today that will guide us through some of the existing type of funding and investments that support circular economy. And will also provide us relevant tips and advice, as I said, on how to secure this funding. So let me share also the plan for today. We will have a short introduction of the BRINC project by the project coordinator, Joan Juul. And then we will move to building a business case for circular innovation with Thomas van Nieuwenhuizen. And then EU support for circular economy innovations. We will have EISMEA agency and the European Investment Bank giving us some presentations. And then we will have the regional government of Navarra. And lastly, but not least, presentation by Lorenzo Valeriani from Metagroup on risk capital for circular economy. And then a Q&A session. Also, after each presentation, as mentioned in the chat, feel free to flag that you want to ask a question. We'll be very happy to stimulate a discussion after each presentation with your questions or comments. So feel free. So without further ado, I would give the floor to Joan to explain briefly what BRINC is about. And I'll let you also share your screen. But first, let me just give you your presentation slide before you share your screen.
Thank you. I will see if I can do it. Do you see that one now?
We do.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita, for the introduction. And yeah, as Anita said, I'm Joan Juul. I'm a project manager from CLEAN, and we have the project management role of the BRINC project. So I'm just going to give you a quick presentation of what this project is and the connection that this funding workshop is. So yeah, I will go over it a bit quickly, but all of us partners are happy to answer more questions and engage. So if you are interested, please reach out to any of us. Basically, the BRINC project stands for Brokering Cross-Border Innovation Through Clusters. And the purpose of the project is to really accelerate the uptake of innovation within circular economy. And we try to do this through the use of joint public procurement. And we try to offer training to both public buyers, SMEs, and inner brokers to really get better at using this public procurement and also joint public procurement as a tool to help get more innovative circular solutions into the market. So a little bit of an illustration of what we see that we try to do. Basically, we see ourselves kind of in the middle and trying to bridge and connect the public buyers and the innovation ecosystems, or the SMEs, and yeah, to really try and get these innovative solutions out into the world. This is a little bit of a quick overview of our activities, kind of in a nutshell. We will facilitate maybe 2 to 5 of these procurement cases or procurement tracks. So where we help a buyer group go through all of these stages of kind of scoping what is the need for a circular innovation that they have, help them get in contact with the ecosystem and also with the actual procurement in the end, as well as facilitating some knowledge sharing and capacity building. And in that process, we will also develop some training modules for these 3 groups, SMEs, brokers, which is us, or the kind of the middlemen that can bridge these two groups and connect these two groups, and then for the public buyers. I just wanted to give you a quick little taste of what we are working with right now. Currently, we are working on 3 different tracks. So one has to do with collecting diapers as a separate waste fraction, and then solutions for recycling this. Another one is how to handle bulky waste in municipalities and make sure we don't throw too much out, but some effective ways of knowing how much furniture and things that you have in your possession, and good ways of making sure we recycle in a good way. And then the last one is the eliminating single-use personal protective equipment in hospitals, and how there can be good ways to minimizing the waste generated in this process. Yeah, so that is kind of a quick what we are working on. Now, I just wanted to also mention that for SMEs, as I said, we will be developing training modules. This is not 100% confirmed, but I just wanted to give you a little bit taste of what it might be that we will develop these training modules in. So basically everything is with the aim to make it easier for SMEs to engage in the public procurement process. And then I guess I will actually just jump already to the last one. I want to mention that we have this online platform where I would encourage you all to go and sign up, and you can access the training materials. We will also share, I think, this funding workshop in there. You can connect with other kind of stakeholders that are interested in this area, and also follow the progress of these PBI tracks if any of them were interested. And I know Anita will probably share the slides, so there will be a link and you can go and sign up. But yeah, so basically this funding workshop is also part of making it easier for SMEs to get their circular solutions out into the world. And yeah, we look forward to a lot of good input and interesting workshop today. I think that's all for me.
Thank you, Joan. And we'll also share at the end another activity that is coming up, because yeah, BRINC is all about many different activities and events. So we will try to follow up, and also at the end of the presentation of today's event, one activity in the pipeline that we can invite you to. So let's now, thanks again for the presentation. Let's now move to our second speaker, Thomas van Nieuwenhuizen. I hope it's a good pronunciation. So Thomas, just to give you a brief intro, but I'm sure he will also introduce himself. He's a green innovation consultant at EGEN, in charge of proposal writing, business case calculation, and project development. And today will give us a good overview of the funding landscape for circular economy and tools for project development. So welcome, Thomas, and I'll let you share your screen.
All right, thanks for the nice introduction, Anita. I'll quickly share my screen. Okay, yeah, so as Anita was already mentioning, I work for EGEN, and we help and advise companies, governmental organizations, and also NGOs to arrange funding that can be public or private funding for their green innovations. And within that, I'm focusing on circular economy. So today I'll quickly tell you something, what we see in our daily work and in practice, the funding barriers that we encounter for circular economy, then dive a bit more into the funding landscape, specifically for the circular economy projects, and how you can combine different funding instruments. And then also some of our experience that we have with certain tools and technical assistance that can help project development and make sure that projects reach financial close, as they call it. So when we look at funding barriers for circular economy more on a system level, so a higher level, What we've seen there in practice, but what also comes forward in research on this topic, is that practitioners experience a certain lack of funding for circular economy projects. So it's difficult to access different forms of finance. But what you also see that a large part of funding, and especially grants and subsidies, is allocated to lower TRL projects, while it's very difficult sometimes for more mature projects to arrange the financial resources that you need. There can also be a certain mismatch between funding needs. So different forms of funding instruments tend to focus on CAPEX cost, while OPEX costs can also be significant and be a large part of the funding gap. Again, it's mentioned that multiple funding instruments are indeed focusing on more innovative, lower TRL projects. But there is also significant investment required, for instance, in infrastructure, which is not that innovative, and then it can be difficult to arrange finances there. And the last barrier that we often encounter is that it can be a very uncertain, ambiguous process to arrange funding. So you need to put a lot of effort and time in to apply for different funding instruments. And on the beforehand, you're not sure what the outcome will be, and if you will get that funding what you apply for. And when we look at this from a more of a system perspective, you see that in the beginning of projects, there are high, typically the risk level is a bit higher, so there are more uncertainties. And when you further develop your project, the risks decrease. But that also has influence on what kind of funding instruments you can apply for. So in the beginning, you typically see that instruments like grants or, for instance, venture capital can be relevant to fund your project. But then in later operations, you would more typically go to commercial banks for debt instruments or maybe some kind of equity. And that has to do with the risks that are involved in your project. So on a higher level, there are some structural risks that are, of course, coming from the market you operate in. So that has to do with the more large macroeconomic uncertainty, but also uncertainty on how policies will evolve, what the regulatory landscape looks like. And then you have some project-specific risks that can be related to technological challenges or different business models and how the revenue and cost streams will look like eventually, but also the operational performance of your project. And then when we look at funding barriers on an actor level, just more from the fund seeker perspective, what we see there sometimes is that funding is not really the core of the project, but it's more an afterthought. So the project has been developed, and then companies or organizations start to look for funding. While it can be very useful to already identify certain funding instruments in an earlier stage, so you can also develop your project in line with the requirements of funding instruments. Sometimes, especially within governments, when certain cities or regions want to become more circular, so be in line with the circular economy, they look for funding for their entire circular transition. While that transition is often consists of different projects, different elements can be part of that transition. And you can also look from those individual projects for funding options instead of for the entire transition you want to pursue. And furthermore, what I already mentioned a bit earlier is there can be a misalignment between funding instruments and the objectives. So different funding instruments can be applied in different phases of your project. Then when we look into the funding landscape, we see a lot of actors are involved, and that's also why it's sometimes difficult to get a good overview of what kind of funding instruments are out there. I will not deep dive into this figure entirely. I believe the presentation are also shared afterwards, but on a high level, you see that project de-risking measures are provided by different financial actors. So that can be certain capital or tax incentives, or for instance, contracts for difference, where there's a bit higher fee applied to sustainable or circular projects. And you have really financing instruments that can help you cover a part of your funding gap. Looking a bit more into the different actors and also the funding instruments you have on a high level. So you see that typically debt is provided by banks, and governments are more focusing on and other public funding institutions, grants and subsidies. It can also be sometimes a certain guarantees that help to get your project to the next phase. Looking at those funding instruments, I think most of these terms would be familiar for you. But debt funding is typically a loan that's provided, which is paid back over time. With equity, it's meant that it presents a share of the company. Part of the company is sold in change for finances. But you also have an in-between form, which is called quasi-equity. And then governments and other public funding institutions provide often grants and subsidies. But they can also provide certain guarantees for your project. So you have a certainty that your project can exist and can further develop to the next stage. And in the very early stages of a project, alternative funding instruments can be helpful. With that, it's meant crowdfunding, for instance, but also a certain social impact bond can help your project in that phase. So here that's plotted on a time scale. So overall, you see in the later phases, debt and the larger equity instruments come in. And in the earlier phases, you can apply for instance, venture capital, grants and subsidies. But also in the very early startup phases, of course, alternative funding can be very helpful. Looking into individual funding instruments more specifically, and how they can be combined. A very relevant program also for circular economy is Horizon Europe. It's focusing on a broad range of TRL, so from low TRL to also a bit higher TRL projects. It's typically a program focusing on research, for instance, in climate, energy, and mobility, and also the circular economy projects. And within Horizon, the opportunity is provided to combine public funding with private funding instruments. So it's not a requirement, but typically Horizon doesn't fund all your project costs. So you have a share of your own project cost that can be covered with other funding instruments. Within LIFE, which is also a relevant program for the circular economy, you see that they already look a bit stricter towards your own funding cost. So life demands that you have a sound financing plan. And especially in our experience for SMEs, they look quite critically at this because sometimes an SME is not able to fund their own project costs by their own financial resources. So then you really have to have a strategy in place to make sure that you can acquire the financial resources needed for your project besides what you get from the LIFE program. When we scale this a bit up, so yeah, one of the bigger European public funding schemes is Innovation Fund, focusing on very large scale projects. And there they really look into the financial maturity of projects. So what are the costs? You have to develop a detailed financial model. What are the costs needed for your project? How are you planning to cover this? And what kind of arrangement, for instance, with commercial banks do you have in place? So there we see already that it's almost required to blend different funding instruments in order to cover your funding gap for your project. And then the last one on this is on grants and subsidies, the CEF program, so Connecting Europe facility. And there it's even required to fund at least 10% of your project cost with a private funding instrument. So part of it is covered by CEF, but they require that during your application process and before you file your application that you already arranged a contract with a commercial bank or with the EIB, for instance. We saw a couple of public funding instruments that can provide grants and subsidies for circular economy projects. But you also see that especially the higher TRL, the programs focusing on higher TRL require that you, besides the grant or subsidy, also acquire other funding instruments in order to make sure that the entire funding gap is covered. One of the organizations that can help you with this when you have a circular economy project is the European Investment Bank. You see that they also won't cover your the entire project cost of the entire funding gap. Typically, they provide up to 50% of the project cost, but this instrument that can typically be a loan or a debt financing to circular economy projects can really help to make sure that you acquire subsidies or grants that have been mentioned before. Another form of public funding that can be combined with subsidies provided by the European Commission are the national promotional banks. They typically also have specific instruments focusing on circular economy projects. And the finance that is offered through these organizations can really help you to reach financial close and make sure that the entire funding gap is covered so you can realize your project. And then you have, besides the more public banks, you have also private institutions that offer funding for circular economy projects. One of them that focuses on a bit more low TRL projects is Polestar Capital. They mentioned that they typically provide funding, also debt funding for circular economy projects before it is interesting for commercial banks to invest in your project. So projects with a bit lower TRL that are still a bit riskier, and that is typically where Polestar Capital with their circular debt fund can step in. Another well-known bank in Italy is Intesa Sanpaolo, and they provide, as you can see, a lot of circular economy instruments that can be a credit. They have a large credit facility to provide funding to you, but also they support your project with more project development assistance. So they have a research lab and they organize all kind of circular economy related events with startups to upscale innovative circular solutions. And the last slide on this is focusing on the Dutch financial sector in the Netherlands. they have a scheme in place which is called green investments. Circular economy is also part of that. And through a Dutch governmental organization, you can apply for this to be marked as a green investment project. And then you can get a green loan through various Dutch commercial banks, such as ING, ABN AMRO, and the Rabobank. And this means you can get a loan for a favorable interest rate. And these private funding instruments we just explained can typically be used to be combined with this the earlier public funding instruments that were mentioned. And then to round it up, there are some tools and technical assistance already in place to help you assess the funding landscape, to make sure you develop a business model that is in line with the requirements that are applied to public funding instruments or even private funding instruments. And this is called project development assistance. PDA is offered, for instance, by the European Investment Bank, but also different European funded projects are focusing on this. So you have the research project Circular Invest, specifically focusing on circular economy projects. And the aim of these project development assistance programs is really to help project partners to develop a business plan, to provide technical and legal assistance to them, all to make sure that they can acquire the financial resources that are needed. For ourselves, we're involved in CCRI. This is the Circular Cities and Regions initiative, might be familiar for you. And within that, within the project partners, we have developed a step-by-step approach to make sure that you have the financial overview you need of your project in order to apply it for different funding instruments. This approach can also be found in a public deliverable that is available to this through this link. But overall, it enables you to do a cash flow analysis, to identify different kind of costs that are required and investments that are required for your project, and then who is making these investments exactly, and where can we apply for different relevant funding instruments. So these are just a few tools that can help you to acquire the funding you need for your circular economy project. And that would be it.
Thank you, Thomas, for this super comprehensive presentation. I think it's a really good way to start this workshop. And let's just see if anyone from our participants would like to already ask a question or has a comment. Then let's start a discussion. Otherwise, mindful of time, we can move to the next presentation, and then I will have maybe also some follow-up questions for you. Anyone would like to ask a question now? Okay, I see a quite silent audience. But I would suggest we wait until the Q&A later, and then let's just give the floor to the next speaker, just to stick to time. And sure. Thanks again, Thomas. All right, so I will just move on and present our next speaker, Annika Kossack. Annika is let me just go to your slide so that you can also see you. Voila. So welcome, Annika. Annika is a project officer at EISMEA, the European Innovation Council and SMEs executive agency. She's also the project officer of BRINC, so we're very happy to engage her in one of our activities and to have her with us today. And she will introduce some of the EU funding programs specifically for SMEs. So welcome, Annika, and I'll leave you the floor and the screen.
Thanks so much, Anita. I will share my screen. For some reason, I don't have the PowerPoint live anymore, but I will just share my screen instead. I hope this also works for everyone.
Yeah, we can see it very well.
Okay. Perfect. Yes. So thank you so much for having me also, and indeed very nice and happy to join one of the BRINC project activities, as we are as I'm the project officer on the other side of the paper, basically. So I'm happy to be joining you today. Just to mention that I'm presenting the funding programs that EISMEA has overall, but particularly I'm in the SME pillar team. So this is more the area that I'm focused on. But if there are any questions on any of the other programs, I'm happy to help answer, but we also have many links that we built into the presentation that can be checked by participants afterwards when you send out the presentation. So yeah. Just to give you an overview of EISMEA, apart from this very long name that I'm very sorry Anita already had to try to present, we focused on innovation support and the single market. And overall, our mission is to provide high quality support to European innovators, researchers, businesses, and consumers, hereby reinforcing the EU's position as a leader in research and innovation, as well as strengthening the single market. At the same time, hereby we try to create opportunities for SMEs and to maintain high standards of protection for its citizens towards a competitive, digital and green inclusive EU. This is fully aligned with the EC priorities or the European priorities for this current period, as you can see here, and there's also a link if you would like to find out more about them. And taking a deeper dive into what we actually do at our agency, I just present you very shortly the funding programs that we actually implement under that are implemented by EISMEA, and I will take a deeper look into them with also more links that you can find. Just maybe also to mention that all of the work program links, because this is of course very interesting for applications for funding, can also be found at the end of the presentation, so you can really take a more detailed look. Usually they are annual work programs, so of course for any new funding work programs you will have to always look for the updates. So the first program that we're implementing is the European Innovation Council that has the aim to identify and support breakthrough technologies and game-changing innovations to create new markets and scale up internationally. This is part of the Horizon Europe Pillar 3. As Thomas already presented some parts of Horizon Europe, this is perhaps also something you can take a closer look at. Something that is not in the presentation, but is also part of Pillar 3 is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which is perhaps also interesting to know because it has a very strong collaboration and link to the EIC, and basically provides also some form of fast track access to some of the services that the EIC provides for its funding. It is structured into the Pathfinder program, supporting early stage research on breakthrough technologies, containing grants from 3 million to 4 million euro, and it was previously known as the Future Emerging Technologies program under H2020. Then it is structured into the transition program. So basically also linking a bit to the presentation from Thomas, it's very much focuses on different stages of the project or of scaling up and providing startup support. Here in the transition program, there is a focus on technology maturation from proof of concept to validation, and of course, business and market readiness. It contains grants up to 2.5 million euro, and yes, so basically that's the second part. And the third part of the EIC program is the accelerator. It also contains business support services. Its focus is on the development and scale up of deep tech disruptive innovations by startups and SMEs. And it is made up of blended finance programs, so it contains grants up to 2.5 million, as well as equity investment up to 15 million euro. Previously, under H2020, you may have come across this program as the SME instrument. And going further, we also implement the EU and place-based innovation ecosystems made up of the three elements: the connection, the scale-up, and innovating SMEs. So part of the connection element is to enhance cross-border network connectivity, interregional collaboration, hereby creating regional innovation valleys and stimulating experimentation practices to advance the new European innovation agenda. Here, or the flagships of this element are the Women Tech EU program, as well as the Startup Europe initiative. In terms of scaling up, it provides services and help to accelerate the scalability potential in Europe and boost network connectivity within innovation ecosystems, and is part of the, and here we also have a link to the annual work program you might be interested in. And a third element of this program is to innovate SMEs, or to help innovate SMEs to increase their research and innovation capacity and productivity, hereby supporting SMEs to embed in global markets through the European Partnership on Innovative SMEs program, which is implemented by Eureka, I believe. So you can also take a deeper look into what kind of support they provide in particular. The aim of this program is the better regulation for innovation, connecting innovation ecosystems, and providing innovation tools. So my third part focuses on the single market program, providing better access to markets and a business environment. Focuses on entrepreneurship, standardization, sustainability of enterprises and consumers. It is very diverse, so I just give you a quick overview of the pillars it is made out of. Of course, more interesting perhaps for this workshop is the SME pillar, providing high quality support to SMEs and entrepreneurs, strengthening the competitiveness and innovation capacity, creation, growth, and its sustainability of the EU's economy support in general. Yes, I think I will not go into too much depth here, also in view of the time, and just go to show you some of the topics that the SME pillar implements and the support that it provides to SMEs, facilitating market access, reducing administrative burden, of course also supporting the uptake of innovation, and addressing hereby also global and societal challenges, providing favorable business environment and an entrepreneurial culture. Once again, the work programs are always linked and attached, so you can take a deeper look and also find the relevant pages where you can always look for the updates of the programs. BRINC being a very good example of the application to the SMP program. So I'm sure they will give you a lot of support. Here, maybe also to mention that a large part of the support we provide is through the Enterprise Europe network. They have a variety of services offered, including international partnerships, advisory support, and innovation support. So I really do invite you to take a deeper look in the presentation, and also to look at the local network contact points that really are there to help you find the right partners and the right funding. The fourth part of the programs we're implementing is parts of the European Regional Development Fund, particularly the Interregional Innovation Investment Pillar. And here we really only fund two parts or two strands of the program, focusing here on supporting interregional innovation projects in their commercialization, the scale-up phase, to give tools to overcome regulatory and other barriers, and to bring projects to the investment level. Okay, and as mentioned, the two strands of the program that we're implementing are focused on the financial and advisory support of the program, so investments in interregional innovation projects and the development of value chains in less developed regions. And I was also asked to give you an overview of some success stories that we're able to successfully apply, but also showcase very well the support provided to circular economy projects. So here we have some projects from the business acceleration services that we wanted to present to you. It's on the one hand the InFarm. It's a Berlin-based startup that actually still received funding under the SME instrument, so the predecessor, which is now the accelerator program. It's highly competitive, but I do invite you to look at it, because you can basically apply anytime. There are certain cutoff deadlines for it. But it is open throughout. And to find out more about these programs, there are many info days that you can join, that I really also highly encourage you to join, because they provide you a very deep dive into the EIC framework. Another success story that you can also take a deeper look at is MIVA, which is a project that is focused on the developing smart reusable packaging, which minimizes waste. It received a grant and equity investment, and in part of this from the accelerator program, it's up to 17.5 million that they received in this particular case. And again, what stands out is that that companies can apply at any time with certain cutoff deadlines. And indeed, I mean, it is very highly competitive, but there are large funds to receive from it. Some other support mechanisms are from the Enterprise Europe network here. There's also links to some success stories in more of the finding or the collaboration with partners for your projects in the circular economy area. So I will not go into too much depth, because I do know I don't have enough time, and I'm not sure if Anita already wants to cut me off. So I will not go into too much detail of the Enterprise Europe network support. But basically, I give you here just some idea of what we do, and I invite you to please look at the links and whatever interests you. There are useful links and also some tips on how to apply to the EISMEA funding mechanisms. So I think my time has already run out, if I'm not mistaken, Anita. And I
yes, Annika, yes, but thank you for the presentation. I didn't want to cut you off, because I think each part of it, it's super important. So, but thanks again. Maybe I would let our next speaker present, and then just ask you maybe a couple questions and see if the audience also has a focus for you. Let me move now to our third speaker, Céline Rottier from the European Investment Bank. Céline is an investment officer within the Equity, Growth Capital and Project Finance team, the EIB, where she focuses on the financing of innovative clean tech projects. So today she will present one of the EIB tools to finance high-risk ventures, contributing to a more sustainable future. So welcome, Céline. I see that you've already taken the lead on the screen, which is great. So the floor is yours, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. I've seen the name EIB pass by on some slides, and also our product name, Quasi Equity. Well, we call it venture debt. Well, it's been developed in collaboration with the European Commission, and one name under which we group this type of tools that we have is also called green transition. Okay, so what is venture debt trying to do? What does it aim? So venture debt is a type of financing that enables the EIB to take a substantial larger share of risk than the bank traditionally has done. Traditionally, EIB is known for project financing, etc. However, for the EU, of course, it's important to advance the climate action agenda, and there are promising companies in the EU that support this goal. But when there is a funding gap, the EIB is able to step in to close that gap. Now, we've been doing that for a while, since 2016. We've provided over $1 billion of venture debt at this point. And as mentioned, it falls under the venture debt tool falls under InvestEU, and we call it a green transition. Now, since we've developed this tool together with the European Commission, we've also agreed with the European Commission on what type of companies are supporting top EU policy goals, and we've also determined a couple of priority sectors. You have energy. The clean energy transition is important, so they can translate in renewable energy, but also energy storage projects. And you can even go a step further and think about smart energy grids, demand response. If it contributes to the energy transition and to some specific EU policy goals, is probably eligible in terms of the sector. Mobility, we don't only want safer, but also smarter and greener mobility. So that can mean drones in certain instances. It can mean electric vehicles or charging stations, but also things like green hydrogen or certain synthetic fuels, alternative fuels, for example. Now, more recently, we've under the green transition, we've also been able to work on new sectors like circular economy, bioeconomy, and low carbon solutions. The team originally started with energy and mobility. So circular economy, there are certain priority sectors like the textile, the plastics, construction, and then we can support projects that not only implement the recycling, but also, for example, that help with the visibility or provide services. Bioeconomy, we see a lot of demand for bioeconomy. That's also because sometimes it's linked to circular economy. You have trees. We have farming. We have also fishing projects, etc. And then we focus on low carbon solutions. Now, when we speak about venture debt, the question we always get is, okay, so what does it mean? What kind of financing can I get from you? Now, We will first look at the project and what the features are of the project in determining what's the most suitable financing. But in reality, we have a range. We can move from traditional debt structure or to a bullet structure. So what we do is that we commit an amount, and then perhaps you can disperse it into milestone based on how you progress on your projects. Perhaps you have you have decided that you want to upgrade your facility in 2 steps. You do a first initial capacity, and then you decide to expand it. So we would tailor the financing in 2 separate tranches. In terms of the availability, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we cover a sufficient period of financing. So we look at the horizon of 3 to 4 years. So you don't have to all the time worry about where do I get my financing for. You can really focus on the implementation of your project. And therefore, we hope that it enables you to be more successful. Now, tickets, they're large. I have to say 7.5 is really small for us right now. I would say the minimum is probably around 15 million at this point. But we can also provide larger tickets. So 70, I've seen 75. Provided that there is a justification that we can confirm that it's eligible. Our financing, we don't request a security package, so it's often unsecured. I already mentioned that it's possible to have a bullet structure, which means you repay everything at 5 years. Of course, it has to make sense for your project to do that. Yes, but we will look at really the cash flows of your project and what makes sense based on conservative assumptions, but you should be able to repay and when. So we're not going to impose repayments in a way. It's not our purpose to put a knife under your throat, you know. So we're really trying to work with you and make it and allow you to give enough space, because we know that often the project we finance, there's some trial and error. There has to be some level of margin. So we take that into account and we have a conversation with you about what should be feasible. Now, this is venture debt, so it's a quasi-equity type of financing. That means it's not it will also be priced according to the risk that we're taking. That means often double digits total remuneration, although we understand that can be a burden on the cash flow. So we do it, the remuneration is divided into portions. There's a fixed interest rate, which is single digit. And on top of that, we will ask for warrants that we get then will have access to or can convert, or we typically also take a put option when there's a trigger event. Perhaps you will have an IPO, or you know, there'll be a change of control. You have you're selling your company, or simply you know, it's the maturity, and that would trigger the EIB's put option. And I already mentioned the pricing is based on the profile of your project and the actual risk that we're taking. Now, why is it interesting for the companies that we're funding? Because we provide relatively large tickets for projects or technologies where there's large risk. Sometimes it hasn't been proven yet at commercial stage. The EIB, we have engineers on board who really also look at the technology, have experience in the sector, so that helps with credibility. We frequently also see that other investors make their investment pending upon EIB approval. We have the terms, as I mentioned, they're there to help you grow as a company. So we're trying to look at what's workable, considering that you're an early stage company and that, you know, you also need some margin for these baby errors, I would say. Yeah, and in terms of the founders, yeah, since we can bring quite a chunk of capital, but there is limited dilution or loss of control, because in practice, the EIB doesn't convert its warrants into equity. We're not supposed to have equity, and we use the put option. So we also have a hands-off approach, which means that we think that you know best how to run your business. So we will typically won't sit on your board or that sort of things. So that's very attractive. If you have to have instead of the EIB equity, that has a very different impact on the way your business is being run, especially if we go to the maximum of ticket that we can deploy up to 50%. Imagine that being equity instead of venture debt in terms of, what happens to the founders or the current shareholders. Besides the fact that the EIB also communicates and there are signing ceremonies, and it helps also the company with visibility, especially if they're starting companies. The investors also appreciate it because it's complementary to the equity. Again, there's limited dilution, and it also enhances their returns. Now, as mentioned, there are some criteria as to who can or who cannot have access to this type of funding. The typical profile can be a startup company, but if you're an established company and you have something very new and the risk is too big for you also to take it, you could also be eligible for this type of financing. A restriction is that the company or the investment has to be located in the EU, so you can be an international company deciding to make a project in the EU, so the capex and the employment that will ensue from the project will be in the EU. So that's a hard requirement. We expect to see that you have some traction already. You've either raised already Series A or B, so we see that you're already having some level of support or some level of credibility. And it was actually mentioned in the earlier presentation, our limit is 50%. So you also need to explain to us where this other 50% of financing will come from. Of course, it speaks for itself that your business plan needs to make sense, that you have people on board who can deliver and navigate some of the uncertainties and related to this type of stage of business. Yes, and then of course it's venture debt, so it's a product that is related to a higher risk profile. So we will have to see also that there is a market failure in that sense to take on that risk. So EIB, we're there to complement, to support, but if commercial lenders are willing to step in, then there's not really a role for the EIB. We're just trying to do that when we see there's a gap, and the financing is not. The financing can not be done through private investors or, as said, commercial banks. And since we're trying to promote solutions for the EU and we're targeting policy goals, of course, if it's a one-off project, that's not so interesting. So we need to see that there's some replicability and scalability of the business so that the impact of the project can be really significant also for the EU. The range of the project goes from very early stages, from a technological readiness level 7 up to more actually the deployment. But still, if you think about circular economy, even if technology is proven, there's still significant risk in how the pricing will develop and the raw material, the supplies, etc. There can be significant risk there. So that could still justify the use of this type of product. Now, I won't dwell on the source and uses, because I already explained to you that we can only finance 50%, and that the minimum ticket is more closer to 50 million, although we can do smaller. And considering that we're only able to provide 50% of the investment, that means that your project should at minimum be 30 million. How does it work if you want to apply? If you think, okay, I think EIB financing is what I need for my project. Now, we talked a little while about criteria, selection criteria for this type of project. So the very first step is for us to understand if you comply with these criteria, and so whether you could be eligible to access the green transition financing. We typically ask the Commission, European Commission, to confirm this. And once they confirm, and our management is also okay for us to go on due diligence, we will go and make an appraisal of your project. Once we have an approval in principle from our investment committee, we can finalize the legal documentation and then do some signature. We try to do some part, like sometimes we can start drafting a bit earlier, provided that's that's of interest for the promoter, the legal documentation. To shorten the period, but you need to count for at least 6 months. We have done it, but that was a promoter that was already had all the material ready, very savvy with the financial models. That's not always the case. So you need to take into account that it can take quite some time. And this is a couple of examples of what has been signed across the different sectors. But one of the examples that we've done most recently last year was recyclable and compostable food packaging. So with Pack Benefit, so that's a company that was founded in 2013, and they make recyclable food trays from wood-based virgin pulp. So this is a Spanish project. They were trying to scale up the production. It's we consider Spain a cohesion priority region, so that's in terms of eligibility. And yeah, so that's an example. We provided them with 13.15 venture debt financing for the commercial scale food trays production plant, as well as some RDI activities that they had foreseen. And this was funded by the predecessor of green transition, which was Innofin Energy Demonstrations. And we have another circular economy project, which was also funded under the predecessor of InvestEU Green Transition, because we started with that only at the end of last year. We only had the first signatures at the end of 2022. So we also signed Renewcell. Renewcell is a textile-to-textile recycling company in Sweden. So they have developed their own technology, which has been patented, and so they create cellulosic pulp, which is called Circulose. And so they claim to be the first company in the world to offer dissolving pulp for textile production that consists of 100% chemically recycled cotton textiles. So we helped them with their first commercial scale recycling plant. And then last year, circular economy can also take place in the critical raw materials. That's very relevant as well. So we're financing the first commercial scale project for pure battery technologies. It's a 36.7 million venture debt loan to Koningswijde Abel Chemisch Fabriek, which is a subsidiary of Pure Battery Technologies. So they plan to convert an established nickel production facility into a PCAM production plant. And the nice thing is that they can do that both from black mass, so battery material process for recycling, or through intermediate metal, so primary stock, primary raw material. And those are, yeah, that's for me. That's what I have to present.
Thank you so much, Céline. Thanks for your presentation. So we're running slightly late on our original schedule, but I think it's still very interesting to hear if anyone has any questions or comments for Céline, Annika, and also Thomas at this point from the participants. You can also post in the chat, as I said, and then we can give you the floor. And then in the meanwhile, let me ask you maybe a question. It's mostly Céline or Annika or both, depending who wants to start. But you have shown that there are many different EU funds. Also, Thomas in his presentation mentioned the Horizon Europe, the Innovation Fund, we have LIFE, so we have plenty of different sources of funding available, and then the investment banks. So what are some tips or suggestions to help individuals navigate among all these funds, and then find the suitable one for them? And also, would you suggest, could it be an option to also try to look for different sources of funding, or just to focus on one and apply for one, depending on the kind of projects? So what is your view on this, if you would have to give a couple suggestions?
So I would say, for my type of financing, you already need to have revenues, right? We don't provide grants. It's really financing. So you're expected to show a business plan can repay. If this goes well, normally you should have access to commercial lending. So we're really more at the end of that trajectory. And we can be, if the company at earlier stages would have had funding through the EIC, or they've demonstrated some things through the LIFE program, that's possible. So to be part of their funding, when we say equity, it can be either equity from shareholders, but a grant would also be acceptable, as long as it is not only EIB and grants, because there's also a maximum on the amount of EU funds that you can have. Plus, I mean, you wouldn't have any skin in the game, so it wouldn't really provide us with comfort that our interests would be aligned. So I would say, we're more on the end of the line, and then it's important to realize where you are on the journey of your company. If you're really at the demonstration, if you're already able to generate revenues. That's for my product.
Okay, thanks. And then maybe more for Annika, yeah, regarding navigating all these different EU funds and sources.
Yes, I mean, indeed, for us, just to add also to what Céline said, and for us, a lot of projects fail, and this is also, I think, what I heard in Thomas's presentation, because they are not aligned with the right objectives, or we see a lot of projects fail for motivational reason. We don't see why they should, why they are motivated to get the grant. It's more on the side also of the sustainability, how they ensure their sustainability with their own finances, but also after the lifetime of a project. So this is where we see a lot of the projects fail during the evaluation phase. And indeed, there is a lot to navigate. But from our side, we also have a lot of contact points and support services, and they really can guide you a lot into the right funding mechanism at the right time for your project. So I would really advise you to take up any of the free support services that most of the agencies provide, but also from the EIC side, there's a lot of info days that you can join, and also these corporate days that they have, although some of them are limited already for EIC members. So yeah, yes, but that's what I would add, maybe.
All right, thanks, Annika. And I see Thomas has his camera open. I'm not sure you want to also pitch in.
Yeah, maybe to complement to what's already said. So the European Commission also has, of course, the funding portal, which I think provides a brief overview of the available funding instruments that they have on a European level. So at least you can get a basic picture of different public funding instruments that are available from the European Commission. And I think what you asked about, whether you should combine different instruments or apply for multiple instruments, it really depends on your project, but also, for instance, on the maturity you have. What Céline already was saying, they're more in the end, focusing more of the end or the more mature projects, and then you really need to show a solid business case, make sure that the other part that's not funded by the EIB is also covered. But if you're in a bit lower TRL and you have a you're still more in the research and development phase, so to say. Then, for instance, within what we already showed within Horizon, you can cover a large part of your funding gap, and also the requirements on your own project costs and how you fund that are less strict than, for instance, at the EIB or funding instruments that are focusing on the higher TRL levels. So yeah, it really depends on where you are with your project, how you should approach this.
Thank you, and Thomas, thank you all.
Perhaps,
yeah,
just
please.
to say that, it might be EIB, like how do I contact? We are actually quite approachable, so it just I can provide my email contact. So if you have a project, you can just send an email.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Céline, for mentioning that. And maybe at the end of the presentation, I hope to still give the floor to our participants in case anybody wants to present their project or ideas, if any. And then we'll also share the presentations afterwards with your contact details, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, then let's move to our, let's say, last session or block of presentations. Let me introduce you, Javier, from the Navarra regional government, Javier Rodrigo Aznàrez. So welcome, Javier. So Navarra is also a member of ACR Plus. So we're very happy to engage one of our members in this event and let you present us the public-private initiative in Navarra to foster the transition to circular economy in companies. So the floor is yours, Javier. Welcome and thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm Javier Rodrigo, as Anita said. I'm an industrial engineer and I work here in the Economic Development Department of the Government of Navarra. And I'm also a member of the coordination office of Navarra Zirkular. I will try to sum up what we do here in Navarra, or we are developing in order to foster the transition to circular economy in our Navarrese companies. So first of all, I would like to show you a timeline with the regulations that the government has been applying. They are evolutions from the European and the Spanish government regulations, and the most important ones are the agenda and the circular economy action plan, where our government tries to show the strategy to foster the circular economy here. Sorry. This strategy has some tools that you will see here in the slide, and the main one is the creation of Navarra Zirkular. This is a public-private initiative where a group of public workers and some associations, some private associations, work together in order to coordinate and make some decisions to develop this strategy. And this initiative was created last year, and for 2025 we have some objectives. As you will see here, they are related to companies that we would like to join this initiative, the projects that we would like those companies to work at, and also we have some objectives about training and diagnosis. And the most important one that I will start speaking now is the funding process. Regarding the funding process, we have two different kind of mechanisms. The first one is the indirect funding, or we call it like that because they are services that the government or Navarra Zirkular offers to Navarrese companies in order to improve their situation about circular economy. And here we have a diagnosis, some working groups that we are developing and training. And after that, we also have the direct funding. They are grants that or some calls that we organize. And there we have R&D projects, waste funds, ERA mine, and competitiveness. R&D projects and ERA mine are co-funded by the European Union, and the rest of the fundings here are local funds. So, starting with the indirect funding, the main service that we offer to companies is the diagnosis service. Here, a person of a technical consultant with a lot of experience in circular economy visits the company or the enterprise, and there they try to look at the company situation and what the company needs to the future to start working or to continue working in circular economy transition. There are two kinds of diagnosis depending on the current level of the company, this basic one or advanced one. And from this visit, the company gets a 3 years roadmap with an action plan. And in this action plan, they have some actions that the company can do by themselves. They will find some project proposals, some collaborative projects, and also they will be able to have follow-up meetings during the following years in order to know the success or the effectiveness of this diagnosis. Also, a consequence of this diagnosis, and it's also a free service that we offer, is the creation of some working groups between companies where they have a predefined strategic for Navarra topic, and they work together to share information, to solve the same problems that they have, and to know the good practices that one or other are doing. And the last service that we are offering is the training. We are starting with some training lessons for the workers of the companies, the managers, and also the public administration workers that will have to be the contacts for the companies. And of course, for the students that are now finishing their studies, we offer them the possibility to start working in circular economy aspects in order to increase the knowledge in Navarra. On the other hand, we have the direct funding. I will try to sum up some of the calls that we have. Of course, they are in the internet, and if you have more interest, we could specify more details. We have the research and development projects. They are managed by my department, my development department, and we have a total budget of 28 million euros in different calls. The higher scored circular economy projects are the winners of this call. Apart from the global budget, we have some specific topics for the circular economy, and there is a requirement that 2 companies have to work with one research institute about circular economy. These ones are the topics that we are now trying to foster, and of course the costs are as a regular R&D project. The second call that is so interesting also is developed by the environment department. Here the money or the budget that is used to finance the companies comes from the waste taxes and fines that companies have to pay. These are more specific in order to reduce or minimize industrial and construction wastes. Here also are the topics. The third one, Navarra is participating in a ERA-MINE joint, where some countries, you can see in the map, from Europe and also Brazil and South Africa are participating. The requirement here is that a company must find companies from at least other 2 countries and make a proposal for a European project. Then there is a European committee that evaluates the project, and for example here Navarra just acts as a funder. The winners just come from the European decision. So it will be nice if we could find some partners from other companies from Europe just to participate in these projects. Now the call is closed and we have 2 proposals, but I think the next year will come more calls. And finally, the last one is competitiveness. We would like to foster competitiveness of the companies through a circular economy. And here, this is smaller, but it's also very interesting for small companies. And just to finish, I would like to speak about the current situation that we have. We already have 76 companies that have joined this initiative. They are from very different industrial sectors. And we are reaching the 40% of the objective that we have for 2025. So we are working well. We also have some collaborators. We call a collaborator as some associations, institutes that are not private companies, but can help us to reach the companies to spread our initiative. And the last one is the Circular Navarra catalog. I would like to show you because it's so interesting. It's a catalog that External Action Department has created. And then and there you will find 50 good practices from Navarrese companies. And their contacts and all the information. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, I will try to answer it.
Thank you, Javier. Any questions for Javier from our audience? Then I will go on with a quick question. We're a bit late, but I still am interested in learning a bit more the design process of this partnership, and more specifically, since again it's a partnership and entails the continuous engagement of SMEs. During the conception of this Navarra Zirkular strategy, did you engage the SMEs, and if so, how? So was there since the very beginning an interaction and engagement with them?
Yes, in this initiative, we are, as I said, we are the government, and we also have some associations. And those associations have a very close contact to companies because they are clusters, they are research institutes, and they close together with the companies. And most of the time they work together. And also we have organized some. Navarra is so different depending on the zone. We have a very very high density for population and companies here in Pamplona, in the middle of Navarra, but the rest of Navarra there are no so big companies. So we have been working with regional agents, and through them we have organized some events in order to let the small companies of those zones know this initiative, and for the moment it's working well.
Thanks, Javier. I think it's super interesting. Also, I've seen that some of the participants are also representing municipalities. So I think also sharing with them afterwards your presentation and this partnership could give some interesting insights. And thanks for presenting it today to everyone. And maybe let's move on now to the next and final speaker. Lorenzo, and hopefully we still get a few minutes to do some follow-up questions. Hi, Lorenzo. So yes, the next speaker is Lorenzo Valeriani, a senior project manager and startup coach at Metagroup, which is an international advisory and investment firm dedicated to the creation and scale-up of knowledge-based companies. So welcome, Lorenzo. I'll give you the floor right away. Yeah, floor is yours.
Thanks, Anita, and good morning, everybody. Just give me a sec to share the screen, the presentation that I prepared for this morning. Now I will start to share, so I hope that you can see it properly, the presentation.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so good morning, everybody again. My name is Lorenzo, and today, I'm the last speaker. So basically, I would like just to sum up a little bit what have been already said, with a specific focus, I would say, on the risk capital for the circular economy. So before going deeply in, and presenting the opportunity of risk capital money for circular economy projects and startups, I would like to debrief you about a little bit Meta. We would like to define ourselves as innovation enablers, because we try to do this in 3 different levels, let's say. We try to cooperate and design innovation ecosystem with municipalities, with governmental institutions. We also move on a second level, supporting directly European projects, universities in pushing the exploration activities for the results coming out from their research. And then last but not least, moving down in the pipeline, since 2010, we were one of the first firm in Italy to start investing in early stage startups. So moving, I would say, the first step in the VC capital in Italy. And so far, then we scale these activities in investment for early stage startups around Europe. We had different funds, not only in Italy, one also in Slovenia, and now we have 4 in Poland. And so basically, moving in our experience, we started to invest in startups. So why risk capital? A lot have been already said by the previous speakers. I would like to highlight that, you have different kind of money of financing that you can raise for your circular economy startups projects. But why risk capital? Today you are in a very positive drive, I would say, for the circular economy sector. This is just a very short graph that I would like to show you, where it is outlined that since 2017, Climatech, that it's, I would say, just a narrow part of the circular economy, was the most hot sector for VC. As you can see, this specific segment moved 10 times since 2017, 2021. Showing that there are a lot of billions of dollars that are outside that you can apply for. So it's a big moment, not only because the huge amount of money, but the risk capital investors are now more focused on the specific impact that are around the investments they are making. So they are becoming sustainable investors. And so this shift that it's taking in the last 3-4 years, it's becoming something very relevant. So for you that are, running circular economy projects, startups, the momentum for getting and knocking on the door of risk capital investors is the right one. So a step back just a little bit, maybe to present what is risk capital, money. I think Thomas already a little bit the brief about this, but just to make this clear, the risk capital money, it's an investment you are receiving in exchange for shares of your company, of your startups. Okay, so it's not debt money. So differently to the debt that was presented also by EB this morning, it's more focused on putting the money in the capital of the startup and taking the risk together. So if the things are not going as expected, the money will be lost also for the investors. So you have not to repay this money that you're receiving as risk capital money. And when you can receive this money, basically the VC industry is, I would say, covering a big spectrum from the very early stage to, I would say, the mature phase, when you need to scale, when you need to have huge investments because you need to move forward to your business. And the main reasons why investors, and especially also most of private equity investors that before were investing, I would say, in more mature investments, in the last years are moving always more in the seed stages because they are seeing more profit behind investments in early stage. So the main reasons why investors are playing this game, risk capital investors, to make money. And the VC industry is the most promising asset that is in the market in the last 20 years. So the profit that investors investing in this ecosystem are receiving the more returns. Of course, they are investing in the highest asset with the risk. So, and it is very important that in this game, you are not asked to have collateral. So when you are knocking at the door of risk capital investors, they are not asking you for, having collateral for them, neither personal, neither, asset. And this is very powerful for you to have access without having nothing. Okay, this is very important compared to the maybe debt capital. So the spectrum is very, large, I would say. In our experience, we invested more with the angel investing and the seed stage. And of course, you can move forward, meaning that it's not just only for early stage phases, but it's also for more mature projects and startups, so expansion and late stage. And as you can see, these are data from PitchBook. The average amount of money you can raise can vary from, I would say, the very early stage with the angel investing that can be around $500,000 till on average deal of more than 30 million with the private equity in the late stage. So depending where you are in your project with your startups, you can understand which is the best, I would say, interlocutor for you about the risk capital investors. In our experience, again, just to show where was our positioning, we were more focused in the early stage area. So if you have a circular economy startups that is developing something in the early stage and you need to boost and you would like to invest money in order to create traction around your business idea, there are two different interlocutors you can talk with in the risk capital arena. On one side, you have the business angels, that these are physical people that have, I would say, network behind, and they are investing their own money. And the business angels are very relevant profiles in the ecosystem at European level, but worldwide, because these people may have a relevant background, vertical background in the industry, maybe because in the past covered C-level positions in big industries or in, or relevant organizations in the specific vertical. And they are not only giving you money, but they're giving you also non-financial support. This means that they can help you with the network, they can help you with potential customers, with the distributors. So having them on board as shareholders in your company, it's not just a matter of taking money, but it's also the plus of having them saying you which is the right customers, which is the right network to talk with, and they can open you doors. And in early stage projects, startups, I think it's pretty relevant for you having somebody with experience that can easily connect and open your network. The other side, you have the seed funds that these are investing not their own money, but money from limited partners. So basically, the VC funds have a general partner that is managing the fund, and the LPs, the limited partners that are providing money. Limited partners can be pension funds, can be also institutional investors, as the European Investment Fund, and can be also banks and corporates. And this specific fund then are investing in startups, and depending on the kind of the fund that has been funded, you can have funds more vertical on the climate tech, more funds vertical on new materials or whatever. So, and the funds, it's then directly investing in startups, okay? And again, the seed funds usually put on the board people from the fund, and nowadays the funds on the circular economy are always more vertical and are always hiring people behind that are experienced, again, to support you in assessing also business issues. So again, also the seed funds are moving always in a more non-financial support, because again, the plus of having somebody experienced giving you money, it's not only the money for moving next, but also the experience that he or she can bring you in the board. This is a slide to show our experience. So basically what we did, I would say since 2010 in Italy, but also in Slovenia and Poland. So we have this kind of, product that was the Ingenium model. And there was an early stage fund, venture capital fund, that has two main LPs, limited partners. On one side, there was a public investor that usually was the regional government of a specific area. In our cases, we launched this, for example, in region Umbria or Emilia-Romagna in Italy. And usually these public investors was keen to boost the innovation ecosystem and boost the economic growth through launching startups. So what they did was they were looking for a general partner, in our case, ourselves, where we, offered them to create a VC early stage fund that was in cooperation with business angels, the private investors. So basically, the mechanism was that there was a match of public money on one hand and private money in the other hand of business angels. And then this money converted in the fund. And then through the fund, we were investing in startups that was based in a specific region where, the public investors was from. And then we invested in, early stage companies. Usually these companies was, early stage or spin-off from the regional universities. And this scheme was very powerful because in one hand, put the same alignment of interest between, on one side, the public investor and the private investors, and the mechanism leveraged the public money. Because again, usually the mechanism was 50%, meaning that for each euro of investment, 50 cents was from the public investors and 50 cents for the private investors. And this mechanism, again, was alignment of interest between the public and the private. But again, they can converge and invest and create knowledge-intensive companies that can scale then at a European level. The focus of these startups, the investment can vary, and who was deciding the specific segments, I would say, that we need to invest in was the public investor, that depending again on the smart specialization strategies that was behind in the region, decided which kind of segments we need to focus in, okay? For example, in Emilia-Romagna, we have great experience for the biotech. Vice versa, in Umbria, it was more focused on the food tech. But again, this scheme, private-public, and having a line of interest moving in the VC areas was very powerful because, again, we had very great stories, successful stories that allow us to show that, private and public can move towards together, also in an area that is very high risk, like, early stage startups. The risk capital money, it's, I would say, a very challenging money, because at the start I showed you that today is a very good moment for raising risk capital money, but you need to know that on average, there's a rule of thumb that one risk capital investors is receiving thousands of pitch of investment proposal every year. And just 1% of this, it's be funded. So you have a good momentum, but on the other side, it's very challenging because there is a very high competitive landscape of startups that are chasing these investors. So you need to know very carefully the rule of the games, and you need to have the right physique to roll to play this game, okay? So I would like to show with you the main, I would say, investment criteria, especially this is fitting our experience for early stage companies and projects, okay? So that are in the, I would say, early phases of their journey, business journey. The main criteria that this kind of investors is taking into consideration is the team, the management team, the people behind the business initiatives, the people behind the startups that are executing the business. Remember, at these stages, everything that you are assuming within your business, it's something that needs to be proved. And until you're not proved, you cannot ask for debt. You cannot ask, for example, for private equity. So in this stage, that is more the debt valley stage, you need to prove everything. So that's why people is the main collateral, I would define this way, that you can provide to risk capital investors in the early stage. So you need to have the right team that can execute properly the business. Then, of course, another specific criteria is the scalability. Your business, your initiative must scale in a specific time frame in 5 to 7 years. What means scaling? At a certain point, if everything goes smoothly and well, your startups will become scalable, meaning that the revenues are growing more faster than the cost. So the fork that the profit that are generating, it's becoming bigger and bigger. And this kind of situation must happen within 5-7 years. Why? Because risk capital investors are investing for having an exit. So at a certain moment, they will ask the money back. And for asking the money back, the possibilities, 90% of the deals, it's coming through acquisitions. So your startups, your business ideas at a certain point will grow and will be acquired by a big company, for example. And you need to be able to do this within 5 to 7 years. And this is very important that you have the right profile to scale between 5 and 7 years. And this is very important because, again, VC, for example, are not investing in restaurant or bar, for example, because maybe they can be profitable business, but they're not scalable. So this is important, scalability. Then, of course, there are other kind of important criteria. IPR, if you are developing hardware, software that is somehow it's protected by patents, it's very important because this intangible asset, it's owned by the company and it's a plus for investors. Then you have also the market sides, meaning the business opportunity behind, so the market demand behind. Last but not least, traction, meaning that you need to show that even if you are early stage, you were able to run an MVP, for example, to gather attention from customers, even if you are pre-revenues, and then that you are comply with the, the ESG, which means that, for example, the United Nations launched the Sustainable Development Goals, and now again these impact investors are looking for startups that can contribute to these sustainable goals. So a last tip, it's that do not talk with strangers, meaning that this morning my previous the speakers spoke about different kind of tools. You need to know which kind of tools it's better for you in a specific moment if you have the right profile to apply for this. Because otherwise, if you're fundraising and talking with the strangers, I would define them, you are losing your time, and then also you're losing the momentum for growing and scaling. And I'm closing. As Meta, we are running with other partners with the Innova Plus, with the client Circular Economy, a project that is called Circular Investor. We are now in the call for applications, and we are looking for circular economy projects that need to be more investors ready. So we are supporting for free, services that are going from the business plan development to the fundraising and the circular optimization. And the call for action is open till the 30th of June. You can go in the website and apply if you are interested, and you will receive free support for getting your project more investors ready. And thanks for your attention. That's it.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for this short but efficient presentation. I see in the chat we have a question from Pasqualino. I was wondering if, Pasqualino, you'd like to take the word to actually ask your question to make sure we understood well what is your inquiry. Because I think the question is what if the TRL must have a proposal, how to access the funding opportunities that have been presented. Pasqualino, are you with us? Okay, well, I think if the question is how to be in contact with the different funding presented today, we will share the presentations later. So we will send to all the participants an email where they can really see all the presentations, and also this includes usually the email address of the speaker, so then you can contact him directly. If it would be Lorenzo, you can email Lorenzo and ask further your questions, present your idea, project, and then they can help you for sure to look in the right place for the money you need. And then we have a second question by Francesco. I guess it's for all the speakers, whoever feel free to take the word. So circular economy projects, especially those aiming at reuse and waste prevention, can be slower than risk capital expectations. Do you think circular economy at large can be an interesting market for risk capital money?
I don't know if maybe I can just apply and maybe just take my perspective. I think yes. Meaning that, as I said at the start, today the risk capital investors, especially what we can define impact investors, are becoming more patient. Why? Because some of these funds nowadays are financed also by institutional investors, which usually, or pension funds, which usually are, I would say, more patient rather than maybe mere banks or financial institutions that are looking for short-term profit. So that's why, again, depending on who are the specific interlocutors we are talking to, there are a bunch of, I would say, impact-driven investors that can be patient also in the risk capital arena and can finance your business initiatives around the circular economy, even if it takes time. For example, in the biotech arena, on average now it's taking 12 years maybe before going from the research in a drug till the clinical trials with the patient. So, but now the investors are becoming more structured around also impact driven, and then I would say that yes, not all of them, but if you're talking with the right guys, you can be considered also if your impact expectation is in the long term.
Thank you, Lorenzo. All right, then just to wrap up, because we have only 5 minutes left, I still wanted to give the floor if any of the participants would like to speak up, because I imagine maybe some of you are here because they have a project idea, and they're maybe interested in knowing where the sources of funding could come from. So my question to you all, if anyone wants to speak up, is if you have any projects that you're seeking support for, or even just experience with financing a circular economy project, and you would like to share maybe a challenge that you have encountered in securing some funding. So that's, if anybody would like to share their experience or their idea of a circular economy project, please, the floor is yours. Everyone's really shy. All right, then maybe let's just leave in the presentation, so you still have the time later on to share your experience and also to connect directly with the different speakers. If one of these funds look interesting to you and you want to know more about it. I see that there's no more questions, I think, in the chat. Yeah, Pasqualino. Okay, so yes, so for the EIB, I would suggest we share the presentation with you. There is Céline contacts there, and as she said, they're accessible and ready to reply to your questions or inquiries. So we will send you a follow-up email shortly with the presentations. So with this, we could close this workshop, which was quite, the main aim was, it's a formative event. So it's really meant to give an overview to you all of some of the funding opportunities out there. And the presentation will be shared, as I said, so everybody can still consult them, take a deeper look, and yeah, find something that's suitable for them. With the consent of all the speakers to share, of course, their presentations. And with this, I'd just like to thank you all again for being here today and listening up. And just one last slide for you all to just to say to stay tuned for our next event by BRINC, which will focus on procurement of recycling single-use materials. So that will be on the 28th of June. For anybody who's interested to come in, listen to the experience of a chain of Catalan hospitals who is trying to carry out a procurement to recycle their single-use sanitary materials, you're welcome to join, to bring your insights, or also just to listen up regarding their procurement process so far, their challenges. So together with the email, follow-up email to this event, we'll also share the registration link in case any of you is interested in joining. So thank you all again for being here, for listening, for presenting, for the questions, and yeah, have a great day and rest of the week.